You are standing in the Hall of Mirrors, 73 meters of gold and glass and candlelight. 357 mirrors reflecting the gardens of Versailles back at themselves into infinity. The most expensive room ever built in human history, and you are standing in it right now, in a silk dress that cost more than most people earn in a year, smiling at a man you are about to destroy. He does not know that. That is the point. You have been at the court of Versailles for 3 years. You know every face, every title, every secret alliance, every hidden affair, every debt, every weakness. You know which minister drinks too much after midnight. You know which duchess is sleeping with which general. You know things about the King of France that could topple governments. And you report all of it to his enemies. Stay with me, because the story of how women became the most dangerous spies in history is not the story of weapons or battles. It is the story of a room full of mirrors and what happens when someone learns to use them. First, you need to understand what Versailles actually was. It was not a palace, it was a machine. Louis XIV, the Sun King, built Versailles for one reason that had nothing to do with beauty or luxury. He built it to control the most dangerous people in France, the nobility. The aristocrats who had for generations run their own territories like independent kingdoms, raised their own armies, started their own wars, and occasionally tried to overthrow the crown. Louis solved this problem with extraordinary elegance. He invited them to live with him. At Versailles, the nobility had everything. The most magnificent apartments in the world, the finest food, the most spectacular entertainment, an endless calendar of balls and hunts and theatrical performances. They wanted for nothing, except the one thing Louis had taken from them so gradually they barely noticed: power. At Versailles, every moment of the king's day was a ceremony. Who helped him dress in the morning? That was a position of honor. Who handed him his shirt? That was a title. Who stood closest to him at dinner? That determined your influence for the entire week. The entire court organized itself around these rituals of proximity. And if you were not at Versailles, if you went back to your estates, if you stepped away from the endless performance, you lost your position. You lost your influence. You lost everything. Louis had turned the most powerful people in France into ornaments. Beautiful, gilded, completely trapped ornaments. You understood this from your first week. And you understood something else. A trap works both ways. If Louis had imprisoned the nobility inside Versailles, he had also concentrated every secret, every alliance, every piece of dangerous information in the same building, all in one place, all accessible to someone who knew how to listen. That someone was you. You did not choose this life. The life chose you, the way it chose most women who ended up doing what you do. You were born into minor nobility, enough rank to exist at court, not enough to matter. Your family had a name, but no money, connections, but no influence. You were exactly the kind of person Versailles was designed to swallow whole. Present enough to be useful, insignificant enough to be ignored. That invisibility was your first weapon. The people who recruited you understood this. They did not come to you with dramatic speeches about loyalty or patriotism. They came to you with something much more persuasive: money, security, purpose. You were 23 years old. Your options were marriage to a man you had not chosen, a convent, or this. You chose this. The training was not what you expected. There were no weapons, no disguises, no secret codes. Not yet. What they taught you first was something far more subtle.
How to listen without appearing to listen. How to remember everything without writing anything down. How to ask a question that sounds like a compliment. How to make a man feel so understood, so seen, so uniquely appreciated that he tells you things he has never told another living soul, and believes afterward that it was entirely his own idea to share them. This is the skill that no history book teaches, the art of making powerful men feel safe. You practiced it until it became invisible, until it was not a technique but a reflex, until you could do it in the middle of a conversation about the weather and the man across from you would not notice anything except that he felt inexplicably comfortable in your presence. Then they sent you to Versailles. This is what a typical day looked like. Morning. The Queen's apartments. You are one of her ladies, a position that gives you access to the most private conversations at court. The Queen is not powerful in the way her title suggests.
But the women around her are. They talk about their husbands, about what their husbands said last night, about what their husbands are worried about which minister is falling out of favor and which general is being given a new command. You listen. You remember everything. Afternoon. A walk in the gardens. This is where the real conversations happen, away from the formal rooms, away from the mirrors, in the carefully calculated wilderness of the king's landscape. Men speak more freely outside. Something about the open air makes them forget they are still inside a trap. You happen to walk near the right conversations. You happen to say the right things. You happen to laugh at exactly the right moment. The laugh that makes a man think you are the most perceptive woman he has ever met. Evening. The gaming tables. This is your most dangerous environment and your most productive one. Men who gamble make mistakes. They drink. They lose money and want to talk about it.
They win money and want to celebrate. Either way, their guard comes down.
Either way, they talk. You are very good at cards. You are even better at pretending to be bad at them. Every 3 weeks, you find a way to leave Versailles for a day, a visit to a relative, a pilgrimage to a nearby church, a minor errand that requires leaving the palace grounds. And in that day, in a location that changes every time, you pass everything you have collected to the person waiting for you. You never know their name. They never know yours. That is the rule that keeps you alive. If you are watching this and wondering how anyone could live like this, leave a comment. I want to know if you think this was courage or desperation, because I am still not sure. Versailles had one thing that made your work almost impossible. Everyone was watching everyone else. This was not paranoia, this was survival. At a court where proximity to power determined everything, information was currency. Who was gaining the king's favor? Who was losing it? Who was seen leaving whose apartments after midnight? Who had been absent from the morning ceremony and why? Everyone was watching. And that meant someone was always watching you. The king had his own intelligence network. Men and women whose job was exactly what your job was, except they worked for France instead of against it. You knew they existed. You did not know who they were. You assumed they were watching you. You assumed that every conversation you had was potentially being monitored. You were right. 3 times during your years at Versailles, you felt it. The slight change in how someone spoke to you. The question that was slightly too specific. The invitation that came from someone you had no reason to know. The moment when you understood that someone was testing you, probing, trying to find the edge of something they suspected but could not yet prove. 3 times you performed innocence so completely that they found nothing. The first time, your hands shook for an hour afterward. Alone in your apartments, behind a locked door, you sat on the floor and understood for the first time with absolute clarity what would happen if you were caught. It was not prison. In the France of Louis XIV, the punishment for espionage was not prison. You knew this, and you kept going. Because stopping was not as simple as it sounds. You knew too much. The people you worked for knew too much about you. The life you had built at Versailles, the position, the access, the carefully constructed identity. None of it could simply be walked away from. You were as trapped as every other gilded ornament in the palace. You had just chosen a different kind of cage. After years inside Versailles, you understood something that most people never learn. Power is not what it looks like from the outside. From the outside, Louis XIV was the most powerful man in Europe. The Sun King, absolute monarch. His word was law. His will was France. From the inside, from the Hall of Mirrors, from the Queen's apartments, from the gaming tables at midnight, you saw something different. You saw a man who had not been alone for a single day of his adult life, who was watched every moment, dressed by courtiers, fed by ceremony, surrounded at all times by people whose entire existence depended on his favor. A man who could not trust a single person in his vicinity because every single one of them wanted something from him. You and Louis XIV had more in common than either of you would ever know. You were both performing, every day, every hour, every conversation. You were both completely alone inside your performances. You were both trapped in a palace of mirrors, unable to see anything real because every surface reflected back only what people wanted you to see. The difference was this: he built the trap. You just learned to live inside it. Here is what history does not record about the spies of Versailles. It does not record most of their names, because that was the point. The most effective intelligence work in history was done by people who were never supposed to exist. Women whose access to power came precisely from being underestimated, whose invisibility was their greatest asset, whose names were deliberately kept out of every document that might survive. We know they existed because of what changed, because of treaties that shifted unexpectedly, because of military campaigns that failed for reasons that had nothing to do with the battlefield, because of ministers who fell from favor at precisely the wrong moment for their enemies and the right moment for someone else. Someone was moving the pieces. History just didn't write down who. The Hall of Mirrors still stands. 73 meters of gold and glass, 357 mirrors. Every year, millions of people walk through it and look at the reflections and think about the Sun King and his absolute power and his magnificent court. Very few of them think about the women who walked those same floors, in those same silk dresses, with information in their heads that could have ended governments. They are still there, in a way, in the silences between the historical records, in the gaps where the documents should be but aren't, in every decision that changed history for reasons that no one could quite explain. Was what you did wrong? Was it survival? Was it treason? Was it both? Leave your answer in the comments, because I genuinely do not know, and I think that uncertainty is exactly the point. Subscribe, because every story on this channel lives in that same uncertainty. The history you were taught had all the answers. The real history only has questions.